Well, in this little section, there's a number of things we can discuss. How does dying fit into God's plan? Does God desire us to suffer and die? A lot of times, you go to a funeral home or some good friend of yours dies or there's this horrible tragedy and people say stupid things like, well, it's God's will. And then we'll look at some other topics like suicide. What does the church teach about suicide, autopsy, eugenics, organ donation, capital punishment, death penalty, Christian burial, cremation, decisions about life support for loved ones. The reason I got involved, that I'm doing this, is because many moons ago when I was first ordained, I was a teacher at Catholic Central High School. And the first year I taught 6 classes of Old Testament to freshmen and 2 classes of New Testament to sophomores. It was a real joy. And then I was told that summer, we want you to develop a course on death and dying, heaven and hell, the last things. And you're going to teach seniors. And I thought, why, how are we going to deal with that? And for the next 9 years, that's all I taught. And it was probably the most, not because I taught it, but it was probably the most practical and moving class that I experienced. I still get Christmas cards and letters from some of those kids. We used to talk about things that, when you'd go to the funeral home, what do you say or what don't you say? Sometimes they would challenge me as to how you deal with the dying patient. What do you do if somebody's dying in your family? And I would tell them about these patients in the hospital that I would go see. And we talk about the stages, and we'll look at some of this stuff. We talk about the stages of dying, the stages that the patient goes through and that the family goes through. Shock, denial, bargaining, anger, rage, and all that. And that those are natural things that happen. And then we talk about the fact that it was a large school, so we had 1,300 kids. So 2 of them that they knew would lose a parent that year. And we made we would go on field trips. We went on a field trip to the funeral home. And we went on a field trip to the cemetery. And unbelievable things happen, and I'll just tell you a few of those things because it sort of has to do with all this stuff. But I would always tell them that if they had somebody in their family who had recently died, they should not go to the funeral home with us. If they died within a year, they shouldn't go. And one time, this whole class wanted they could go to pre-period, so we all go to the funeral home. We had a general introduction upstairs in the chapel, and we went downstairs to the casket display room, so they know that this is something you do, and you pick out a casket, and they, look under the mattress, and you try to find the cost of it and all that. And we went in there, and this girl started sobbing. And so of course the kids are all upset, so I grabbed this gal and drug her out. And I said, did somebody in your family die? Why did you come? And my father died. I said, well, why did you come? I said that if somebody died recently, you shouldn't come. And she said, oh, he died a long time ago. These were seniors. I was 3. And my mother didn't let me go to the funeral home. And after he died, I could never mention his name. And she took away all the pictures. And so I said, well, I will drive you back to school if you want to. But I think it might be better, if you want to go back into that room and you can tell me everything you remember about your dad. And we went in there and we both cried as she was talking about. Because you just don't know what people are thinking. And sometimes people say things, to their kids that kind of get them all messed up. And they talk and talk and talk, especially to little kids, heaven is up and hell is down. So they take their little 4-year-old to the cemetery, and he sees the hole. Might not say it, but he thinks, Grandpa went to hell. I wonder what he did. Another time we had, this is the last, there was a girl whose brother had been totally wild. He left school as a junior, went out to California, was involved in drugs and sex and all that stuff. Finally came back after about 4 months, was reconciled with his family. I don't think was reconciled with the church, but with his family. And he got on a motorcycle and was going up Route 7 and got hit by a truck and killed. And this girl was supposed to start this class 3 days after his funeral. So I said to the principal, I don't think she ought to be in there. And she's going to be, a wild woman, and all the rest of the kids are going to. And so he called the parents, and, they said they wanted her to this class. And I can still picture that class. And the first day that I would do this, when I was going to teach this, I went up to Detroit, and if anybody saw me, they would have thought I was some kind of lunatic, because I had this camera, and I'm taking pictures of open graves and gravestones, and backhoes and all this stuff. And I took a picture of my mother's stone. And so the first day, I never said a word. They just came in, and when the bell rang, I started to show these slides. And the reaction was, this is sick. He's nuts and all that. And then they, get to the Campbell, and they'd all laugh, and somebody'd say, shut up, it's his mother. And then they'd get all nervous to see if I was going to jump out the window or what, and I'd just keep. So then I would say, the next class, I said, before we get into the material, do you have any questions? And so for a couple of weeks, we just would carry on about all kinds of things. That class, nothing. And so I thought, well, what are we going to do? So the second day as we started, and everybody they're all kind of looking at this girl. She sat in the middle row, the third one. And finally, very slowly, she raises her hand. And you could cut the tension in the room with a knife. And she says, what if somebody was real wild and everybody, not everyone, and they left home and they, went out and got him, and but they weren't reconciled with the church yet, what would happen to them? And this had to be the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. And today you'd probably get arrested, but I walked down the aisle and knelt down next to her, put my arm around her. That's probably like the arrested. And I said, your brother is not in hell. And everybody in their room started to sob. And for 2 weeks, we talked about her brother, and we talked about God's love, and we talked about his mercy and forgiveness. And a lot of times when people want to talk about, they've had a death in the family, or somebody is dying, they want to talk about it and people won't let them. I would tell the kids, if somebody has a death in their family and they come back to school and they're walking down the hall with you, and you're uneasy, and they say, boy, my mother's funeral was just so upset, and you don't know what to say, so you say something like, Well, you really missed a great football game on Saturday night. I said, what does that teach? You don't care. And I said, you know what you have to do is you just have to let them know that, I care for you. I can't imagine how horrible you feel, but I'm here for you. And it was a good group because I told him one time on my way home from school, I went in, a parishioner said to me, my husband is in the hospital. He's not Catholic and he's dying, but he won't admit it, and he's swearing at everybody and yelling at everybody, and the nurses are, they hate him. So I said, I'll go visit him. So I go in there. As I'm going in the room, there's some nurses coming out, and she's shaking her head. She said, good luck. So I went in, and I introduced myself, and he turned his back out the window, and then I said, I'm sorry that you're sick. He said, get the hell out of here. So I did. So the kids said the next day, did you go to that? And yeah, well, what was it? So I told him, I said, well, what'd you do? And I said, I left. And they said, well, you can't do that. You got to go back. And you got to talk to him about death. I'm thinking, oh my God. So that afternoon I went in, and when he saw me coming, he turned his back. And I stood at the foot of the bed and I said, Jim, you know you're dying, and I know you're dying, and I'm scared to death at the thought. What's it like? Because I'm so afraid. And he started to cry, and we talked. A lot of times people, you don't want to talk about it because you're afraid that person will get upset when you talk about it. I'll shut up. Is there some topic you want to look at? Or something that you didn't know about the church? In the old days, the church didn't, if somebody committed suicide, you couldn't have a funeral in the Catholic Church. In fact, it was so strict that if somebody committed suicide, the priest couldn't even, like the priest, go and have a service at the funeral home. And if people had masses offered, you had to mark special intention on the mass. But now they understand that if anybody commits suicide, they've got to be psychologically, obviously ill and upset. And so the church now does what Jesus would do and is very merciful. One time in my first parish, Brilliant, Ohio, we had this guy that was a seminarian. He was home for the weekend. And after I think the Mass was like at 10 o'clock, we had Mass, and I got this call from this lady, and she said to me, she was crying, and she said, I was only there like a couple of months, and she said, you haven't met my son because he hasn't been coming to church. But when I came home, I found him in the garage. He shot himself. Will you have his funeral at the funeral home? So I said, I'll be right over. So I went tearing over there. The police were there and all that. And his foot was sticking out, so I anointed his foot because there wasn't much else to anoint. But anyway, so I said to this lady, not only will I have the funeral, but we're going to have the funeral in church with Mass. And so about 2 o'clock that afternoon, there was a knock at the door, and this stupid seminarian was standing there. And he said to me, I represent this parish, and I understand that you are going to have a funeral for whatever this kid's name is. And you cannot do that. So I escorted him to the front door and threw him out. Then I called the seminary and demanded that they throw him out, which they did about 2 months later. And we had the funeral, and I can remember the homily that I gave the following Sunday. It was very brief. I said, I understand that some of you were upset that I had the funeral this week. Did it ever occur to you that this young man couldn't find God in any of his friends because they rejected him? He couldn't find God in drugs. He obviously couldn't find God when he came to this parish because of your attitude. So maybe, just maybe, he said, if you are out there, here I come because I'm so miserable. So don't you ever. So we don't know, if somebody commits suicide, you have to be merciful. Those people are so distraught that they're not responsible. Okay. Questions? What do you want to look at? What do you want to talk about?
Some areas where you need a judgment, like end-of-life care, and when you have to trade off between what you can afford, what you can't afford, what the patient's prognosis, quality of life, and something in that line probably is good to talk about. We have to make a decision.
See, ordinarily, I don't think that, people will tell me sometimes at the hospital, they'll say, my mother or my son or whoever is on a life support system, he's on a ventilator, and they're saying there's no brain waves and they're going to shut the ventilator off. We have to decide, what should we do? And I tell them, you don't have to decide. You don't make that decision. The doctors do that. And if there's no hope for this individual, and especially if there's no brain waves, they're already, with the Lord, so you let them go. Now, obviously, if they shut the ventilator off and the person is still breathing, you don't, do anything to stop them from breathing. There's somebody at the hospital who's a parishioner of this parish who's been in a coma there for 6 or 7 years. And the hospital has chosen to keep that person.
Not unheard of that they recover.
Well, I heard yesterday on the news coming back that there's the foreign minister of Israel, I guess, had a stroke about 8 years ago or something. Ariel Sharon.
Oh, yeah.
He had a stroke, and yesterday there's all kind of brain activity that was nothing before. But there's all kind of brain activity going on, and they don't know what's going to happen with this guy. So, you don't know. What the church teaches is you don't have to go to any extraordinary means to preserve your life. Now, what's extraordinary means? If they have to put you on a ventilator or something for a day or two, that's, I guess now it's considered ordinary. In the past, it would not have. Extraordinary means, would you have to, if they said the only way you're going to live is if you get a mechanical heart, would you have to do that? I don't think you'd have to do that. But ordinary means.
Well, like my grandmother has, we just got power of attorney and stuff for medical stuff. We set it up to where they're not the resuscitator.
Yeah. That's, if your heart stops and, and there's no way, it's not going to come back, then you let them go. Now, if there's hope that this person, could get better, then you should you should try to help them. But if there's, somebody who has, severe cancer and they say, you know what, I don't want any more chemo, I'm done. Can you do that? Absolutely. Organ donation is fine. Here, if somebody can use your eyes, why not? If you're, in an accident and your heart's in good shape, why not let somebody have it? I have it, but they can have whatever they want.
Hope no one gets my eyes. Better give them these too.
Dr. Mayo said my veins are really good in my heart, so
where'd they get them?
Where'd they get them? Where'd they get them? Well, they only had a heart cath last 2 weeks ago, and he said, they're really good. Good deal.
I think that the important thing is that medical, they of course they want to harvest them while they're fresh, and sometimes they bend where the patient really expired yet. There's some
you have to make sure that the person, like a lot of, they were talking about it this morning when I went up to exercise at the hospital. One of the men there, the organist at his church, I guess she went back and forth between two churches, and I saw it in the paper tonight that she was killed in an automobile accident. And now, obviously, and she was 62, I read, so they took her to the hospital. She had a good heart and all that, because she had died like that. Then if there was something that they could use, that why not let somebody who needs a kidney or a heart or something who's on a waiting list, if they can use them, they can have them.
Christian burial and what are the churches, I guess,
In the old days, cremation was done a lot in communist countries because they said, well, there's no soul. But cremation was always done like down in like New Orleans. They don't have enough room. And at some point, cremation was done because it was sort of like a denial of the soul. As long as that's not the reason, if somebody, because of convenience, if I died here and they're going to bury me in Florida, it's a lot cheaper to do it that way than to send a casket. And again, concerned with burial spaces and all that kind of stuff, cremation is fine. The only thing that the church says is the ashes are to be buried. You're not supposed to, throw them in the backyard. You're not supposed to put them in an amulet to carry around. And last year somebody said to me, a parishioner said, I'd like to have, a burial for my mother. And I said, when she died? Oh, she died 9 years ago. And she said, what we're going to try to do is but my sisters have ashes, so she's divided up 9 ways, but we can't find one of them. So, and I said, well, let's bury him.
Do what we can. Sort of like the argument, amputated limb.
Yeah.
But if you get cremated, you can still have a service at the church.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been to many of them.
Yeah, we've had them here. Yeah. In fact, there's a little pole that that you use instead of the... Now, what's preferred, a lot of times it doesn't happen. What's preferred is that they have the funeral mass first with the body and then take the body away and cremate it. But a lot of times people just want to be cremated right above it. God doesn't care, I don't think.
Right.
What about donating your body to science? Because it works on my mom's back. She died like 3 months before that time.
Yeah.
I could have seen her.
No.
Well, when I was ordained a deacon, I was at the cathedral, and the pastor was my senior year again. He had some kind of a rare kidney disease, and finally he died. And he had willed that, the Cleveland Clinic even asked him, and he willed that his body be donated to the Cleveland Clinic. So they had a funeral mass. They involved him in a certain way. And they kind of fast, and then they took the body to the Cleveland Clinic. And I remember about 3 or 4 months later, we got a notice that the remains of Senior Year are going to be brought back, and it will arrive at the cemetery at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. As many priests as possible could come for the interment.
Yeah. And they do respect the bodies, the institutions.
Yeah, and they bring it. They keep it for a certain period, and then they return it.
They'll return it, or they'll bury it there, respectfully. So I think that's quite all right. It's basically respecting the body, relation to God.
Yeah.
Now, do you have funeral services that are non-Catholic? If they're family members of the Catholic family?
Ordinarily at the funeral home, although a couple of times I've had them in church.
But typically you do them at the funeral home.
I used to, when I was first ordained, at the funeral home, and they did a lot of funerals. And the first question they would ask is, what minister would you like to have? And if they say, we don't want a minister, they say, well, you'll have to go to another funeral home. We won't have it. And so I'd get calls every once in a while to go to the funeral. And one time they called and they said, this Jewish man died. He hadn't been at the temple in 4 or 5 years. The rabbi refused to bury him. Would I do it? I said, get me a yarmulke and I will. And he did. They called back in about 10 minutes. So I mean, it never mentioned Jesus or the resurrection. Went in and sang a couple of Jewish things. They loved it. It's kind of fun. Okay.
I'll just hand you out a handout that we've worked on before, and I added some things to this session tonight, and sexuality and morality. And the way it's laid out, just a little bit of general stuff here in the very beginning on page 1. And it covers love of the husband and wife, and then the gift of a child, and then it talks about offenses against the dignity of marriage. And then we talk it's got a little bit of information on the vocation of chastity, and that Christ was a model of chastity. And then at the top of page 2, we've got offenses against chastity. And then I started out, I got this Father Kawa last week mentioned the UCAT book, and it's got a lot of stuff that the way it's broke out in the question, and then explains a little bit about that section. And I thought it was real good, so I just went ahead and put together the questions. And it starts off with the 6th commandment, which is, you shall not commit adultery. And then this section covers sex within and outside of a marriage, and how, why, and what we consider moral and immoral sexual behavior. Homosexuality, fundamental linkage between sexuality and reproduction. And then it had a lot of questions, and it may be just to strike an interest. It's something you might want a little bit more meaning on, or know a little bit about. But the way they ask them is really good. And I might just run through the questions real quick. I'm not going to explain them, and then we'll just start off. What does it mean to say that a man is a sexual being? That's the very first part of it. Then, is there a priority of one sex over the other? What is love? How is sexuality related to love? How can anyone live a chaste life? Does everybody have to be chaste, even married people? Why is the church against premarital sexual relationships? How can you live a Christian life if you're living in a premarital relationship or have already had premarital relations? Is masturbation an offense against love? What is meant by fornication? Why is prostitution a form of fornication? Why is the production and consumption of pornography a sin against charity? Why is rape a serious sin? What does the church say about using condoms to fight AIDS? What is the church's judgment on homosexuality? What are the essential elements of a Christian marriage? What significance does a sexual encounter have within marriage? What is the significance of a child in a marriage? How many children should a Christian married couple have? May a Christian married couple regulate the number of children they have? Why are all methods of preventing the conception of a child not equally good? What can a childless couple do? What is the church's judgment on surrogate motherhood and artificial fertilization? What is adultery? Is divorce the appropriate response? What does the church have against marriage without the certificate? So, I mean, there's a lot of other questions to come up, but this gives really the church's view on each one of those questions. And I'm going to turn it over to Cathy.
A lot of times we look at things like this and we look at the catechism and we say, well, why does the church have so many rules? Why do we have to follow all these rules? And it's I guess it's the way we look at the rules, you might say, the way we look at God's law. We're all made to be sexual beings. That's how God created us. Sex is not a bad thing. People go, oh, we can't talk about sex. It's bad. It's not bad. God made us to be sexual beings. He made us male. He made us female. He made us to procreate. That is one of our purposes in life, to love one another, to create life. He gives us that possibility as a man and as a woman. So that is a part of God's plan in creation and existence. Unfortunately, society has taken that and twisted it and made sex into so many other things. You know, there's sexy things. There's, you know, the way sex is portrayed in movies and in magazines and in the media and everything. And when we stop and think what God designed in humanity, He created us as male, as female, Adam and Eve, to be together, to be united, to share love, to share life, to share sex. That's all a part of that process and in our creation. So sex is not a bad thing. It's when it's twisted and turned into other things. It's when, you know, we're made man and woman. That is how God made us. That is how we are to exist. You can't have a man and a man to create life. We're not made that way. You can't have a woman and a woman together to create life. So, you know, people say, well, you know, there's people that really love each other, and even though they're, you know, the same sex, they're the same gender. Well, that's wonderful that they care about each other. But the church does not look down on people who are homosexual and have those tendencies and those feelings. They look down on the person acting out on those tendencies. So for somebody to say, well, I think I have homosexual feelings, that is not a sin. It's when you act upon those feelings that becomes a sin. Because I don't want to say the main purpose, but one of the main things when God created male and female was to procreate. And that can't happen in a homosexual relationship. So there are people, and I know several people that attend the Catholic Church who are, that say they have those homosexual feelings and those tendencies. When they act upon it is when it's wrong, is when it's sinful. So, what else? You know,
Just as if a person who without same-sex attraction were to act out lustfully, it's about the same thing, because you're not doing it in the framework that God has set up for it. So you can you can decide whether one's worse than the other, but I think they're both bad, and the tendency is there. In any case, if the attraction makes you think beyond a female or a male as a creation of God, but at something for my own pleasure, let's say, or just to be frank about it, that's not why they were created, and that's not why I was created. So, it's not picking on anybody in particular, because any normal human being is going to have to fight that somehow or another in their life, or else they're by themselves.
And I mean, there's nothing wrong with, as somebody said, admiring God's creation.
Right.
You know, for me to say, oh, you know, look at that guy there, isn't he handsome? There's nothing wrong with that. But when I take it beyond that, and I sit and I dwell on it, and I think about it, and I go home and I keep thinking about that person, you know, and a man to think about a woman, and to use them in some other ways for their own personal satisfaction, that's when it's wrong. You know, it's one thing to be in admiration of, you know, someone else, but to not linger on that.
Love is the thing that's missing there. Right. I mean, it's you've got all the media, you've got the pornography, you've got all that out there, the prostitution, both male and female, and it's they're doing it for money. They're not doing it for God's means. God could care less about money as far as that goes. What he cares about is that you have a loving relationship. And as Cathy said, sex is part of it. And that's right at the very beginning. It tells about the very beginning, man is a sexual being. And he created them for each other and for love. He created them with erotic desires. Not lust, but erotic desires and the ability to experience physical pleasure. And in that was so they could go ahead and create life.
And that's true. It is to be in the context of a loving, married relationship. That is, I mean, that's a part of God's design. You know, you make that commitment to love someone. You love them with your heart, your soul, your whole being, and you're willing to commit to that person. Love and an intimate relationship with that person is that next step with them. And unfortunately, society has it all backwards. You know, everywhere you see, you know, people are, you know, you go and you find out if you're compatible with that person before you marry them. And we're supposed to decide, get to know that person, find out who they are, and then make the commitment, and you're united with them. And you get to have that intimate personal relationship. Unfortunately, society doesn't show it that way. But that's the plan of God. You know? Some people say, well, why do we have to get married? Well, marriage is, again, we go back to the sacraments. When you are married in the church, you're receiving that grace to strengthen that bond between you and your spouse. So, you know, it's all part of this large plan that God has for us. Does anybody have any questions about issues that we haven't specifically covered? There's a lot of things.
Yeah.
Lee did a good job coming up with all of these questions. Sometimes people ask about, when we talk about reproduction, that's always a question that comes up. You know, what if you can't have kids? We say, well, that's one of the primary things. When you agree, you get married, that's one thing that's part of your vows is, you know, you willingly accept children as a part of your life. What if you can't have children? What do you do? What if we don't want to have children? What if we have too many children and we don't want any more? You know, there's all these questions that come up. You know, God, you have to always keep in mind that God helps you with what you can handle in life. If you trust in Him and you have faith, He will help you through any situation. I know a couple in particular that could not have children, and they tried. And I mean, and I heard stories, you know, the tears and the, you know, the prayers and everything. And after a while, they finally said, God, it's in your hands if this is what's meant to be. Well, they now have 2 very lovely children. And
It's funny how that works, isn't it?
it is. Sometimes we worry about those things, and we have to just let God know that it's in his hands. That he's going
I
to
have an
take
adopted grandson. And, I'm not worried about that because it's not flesh. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. So that option really works well.
I work with a couple parents. I work for Children's Services, and we have a couple foster parents that can't have kids. And it's weird how I've seen through 2 years of working with 2 different families who absolutely could not have children. One family took a baby home straight from the hospital 2 days after she was born, and they'll keep her for life. So in a way, it was like, here's a parent who couldn't raise a kid, but here's these parents who couldn't have one, and now they're going to raise their kid for them. So it's kind of neat to see it play out like that, too.
How wonderful. That, accepting we are who we are, we're as God created us, and if we're fertile and able to have children, wonderful. If not, then we have to deal with that also. But
And that's difficult. There are people who do have to deal with that they can't have children. And yes, there is all kinds of medical technology out there that can be used to help people have children, but is that right? Should we be going to these extreme measures? You see the people that end up having 6 children at once because of all the that's pretty tough. And we all question that. Is that right? Well, should we really be playing God and doing that?
Mm-hmm. This has got a real good response on that. It says, out of respect for human dignity. Mm-hmm. Yes. Second bullet down from the top. Out of respect for human dignity, the church cannot approve of the technological assisted conception of a child through artificial insemination or fertilization. Every child has in God's plan the right to have a father and mother, to know his parents, and if at all possible, to grow up surrounded by their love. One thing I like about these out of the book here, the responses were, they're just everyday responses. There's nothing. It just tells you that, it's really what the church believes, and it's in very simple terms. So,
Well, and that goes also with contraception. People say, well, if you don't want to have, the church used to say, have as many kids as you want, and that's not a bad thing. You can have as many kids as you want, but you also need to be responsible as a parent, and in this day and age, how many children can you raise, can you tend to? That's true too. However, a lot of people don't realize when we talk about artificial contraception that one of the biggest reasons, maybe the main reason the church is against contraception is because many times it actually doesn't prevent pregnancy, it actually leads to an abortion. If you're using the pill, it can actually allow an egg to be fertilized, and then it's aborted. So it's not just preventing pregnancy, it's actually doing what we're against, and that is killing a child. So, yes, we have to be responsible, and that's why, again, we have Dan here telling about NFP and what that is. It's not, people used to say, that's just quackery, you can't control, when you have a baby. Yeah, you can.
It used to be called Vatican roulette.
Yes, I've heard that. You can. There are cycles, and there are lots of ways to tell when a woman can have a child, when she is fertile, that's all part of that process, and learning and growing together in love and learning in that process. So, there's a lot of interesting things. What else? Any topics we didn't hit that anybody wants to hear about?
Yeah, anything you want to, at the very beginning there, it tells about the offenses against the dignity of marriage, adultery, divorce, polygamy. incest, free union, no commitment to one another, right to a trial marriage. And really, human love does not tolerate trial marriage. It demands a total and indefinite gift of persons to one another. And then the offenses to chastity, which are lust, masturbation, fornication, pornography, prostitution, rape, homosexual practices. So, I mean, and the questions that they ask pretty well cover just about all of these in one way or another. But if there's anything else, you know, we can give you a quick guide to where it might tell you more, or maybe be able to answer it.
Do you know if marriage originated, like the concept originated with the Jewish people, like through God? Was that where it originally came from? Or I'm just thinking, because I know it's a society today, people are like, well, we should have the right to get married. The whole concept of marriage is based on Christ, well, and the Jews had marriage before Christ, but so it's like, it is like, the only reason it even exists because it was founded by the church and God, but I just wondered if there are other cultures outside of the Israelites that were practicing marriage.
Yeah, that's what you call marriage. There's always been, in all the cultures, say at least a jealousy between the couples, you know, against other people entering into that special relationship they had, no matter what they called it. That's common to all cultures.
But I guess they probably didn't have the concept of one flesh and all, you know, the sacramental view of it is obviously different than what the other cultures would say.
Probably. Yeah. It's a Jewish culture where, by the way, an interesting thing that part of the ancient Jewish wedding thing is that we break the cake and eat it. They would say, take and eat, this is my, but they used to say that in the ancient Jewish weddings. And there's a parallel there. It's a very important part. You get into the theology of the body.
Well, you know there was marriage before Christ, just because, I mean, you think of Mary and Joseph even.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, the culture, but I don't know that, I don't know how they oriented it and how they actually.
Right, and then Paul, when in his travels and teachings with the Gentiles, and they ask about divorce and how that'll go, you know, and we're back really with the Israelites.
You can finish
You know,
up and move in about 5 minutes here.
I think at that time they could have divorce.
Well, that matters what era.
Right. But as even in Genesis, it was. I mean, that was the natural means, was man and woman, and that was really a marriage right there at the very beginning. And then Jesus with the church. The church is Jesus' bride.
Right.
And I'm sure the marriage,
The ceremonial part.
prior to Christ is probably very similar to how it was after,
Yeah.
it became a sacrament.
Right, I'm sure, yeah.
I'm just curious as to, like, compared to other cultures, because you hear today, it just drives me crazy when people are like, well, we should be allowed to get married. I'm like, well, marriage is a sacrament. It's something that was created by the church. It's like, I don't know. How can you get married, you know?
Well, I mean, even today, I mean, you go to a justice of the peace.
Civil
That's
marriage,
a peace.
yeah.
You get a civil marriage.
Yeah.
The church had really
Nothing to do with it.
nothing to do with it. The mayor or whoever of the little town could, you know, he has the right to.
After the vote.
Yeah. And in the Catholic Church, I mean, the priest or the deacon, they just witnessed the marriage.
Yeah, right.
But that you're married in the church
Right.
is what is the whole
Right.
purpose behind it.
Right, and that one question there about the certificate, it explains a little bit about that. The very last question on page 6 tells a little bit about why.
The church with,
I mean, well, and again, that's a society. You see all these, beach weddings and, weddings in the Bahamas and all this, but, I mean, if you want to start your marriage and have God as a part of that, where would you start? Start at the church.
And God needs to be a part of your marriage.
Yeah.
Right.
It's going to be part of your life. If your partner is a creation of God as well,
Absolutely.
don't take that into account in becoming one with them, then you're missing that whole dimension. Right. What's done to our culture.
Okay, move on. I'll kick you out.
Read as much or as little as you like, but it all has to do with our topic here. And covers all different aspects of marriage and family life and sexuality in marriage, and even chastity and purity. Often you think about that, when a couple's dating, before marriage, but that's needed in marriage as well, So, a lot of good stuff. Karen's going to be coming. Janet. I get you two mixed up all the time. Probably because it's been at RCIA that I've gotten to know both of you simultaneously.
We're interchangeable.
Yeah. I remember that. Oh, yeah. Karen and Lee go together.
That's all right.
Very good. Thank you.
We went to school together.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's good. That's good. So, hey, yeah. Yeah.
There's Kevin here now.
Oh, very good.
What do you call
Got
me?
Karen and Janet.
Oh, well.
I said, you always want to be a nurse.
That's right. That's right. I want to retire. She's retired.
Oh, boy, yeah.
Oh.
Okay, well, we'll let you have the floor, so if there's any questions or thoughts or anything that you are interested in, just shoot and we'll go from there. all kinds of possibilities. Like this first page, it says male and female, he made them, and that goes back to, of course, Genesis, and Jesus talks about that in the Gospels. He says, when they ask him about divorce, and he says, because of the hardness of their heart, Moses, wrote a decree of divorce. But for you it cannot be so, because in the beginning, he made them male and female, and man would leave his home and cling to his wife, and the two would become one. And so that was very clearly, Jesus taught that and intended that for his church. And that's why marriage became a sacrament. He raised it to the level of a sacrament. Because, of course, marriage has always existed from the beginning. And that was from the beginning what God intended. So he just brought it back to what God intended. And so the church has always taught that from the beginning. So that's why there is no divorce in the church. But the church, wants to bring healing and whatever the situation is. So that's why there's annulments, and which basically says that there was something lacking at the time of marriage, and so the marriage never existed sacramentally. It doesn't mean the kids are illegitimate or anything like that. It has no bearing on the children. But the church, it's not just Catholic divorce. That's sometimes people think that's the church's way of having a divorce, but it's not. It just says the marriage never existed. There was something lacking at the time of the marriage, and but that brings life. What the church teaches, and Pope Blessed John Paul II, he did a whole series that became the theology of the body. In his Wednesday audiences, he taught this for many weeks and months, and it's really a revolutionary teaching, a real gift to the church and to the world. How he explained in such detail what Jesus was talking about, what he was referring to in Genesis, and applying it to our lives, in our world today, and what God intends for us as human beings, our sexuality, and how beautiful it is, his plan for us. So sometimes people might have such a negative view of the church and her teaching on sexuality and morality. And what's the church have to do with that? If I feel this is right, I should be able to do this, live this way. And who's the Pope in Rome? He's an unmarried man. Well, who is he to tell me what I can or cannot do in my bedroom? That kind of thing. And that's such a negative, bitter view. But when you understand it, like this brings out in these articles, the beauty, of God's plan. And it's such a positive, and because God wants us to have a fullness of life and love, experience His love, be able to love others as He loves us, lay down our lives for one another, and that's what He wants for us, and that's why He's given us the church, and that's why we have these teachings, so that we don't hurt each other in our quest for happiness and love. So that's pretty awesome. So we do our best to prepare couples before they, get married, and that's why there's such a long, lengthy, at least 6 months time needed for couples before they enter into marriage. And then even then, sometimes might be something lacking, but we do our best, and then see what happens after that. But
I have a question.
uh-huh.
I know that God intended couples to have sex to procreate,
Mm-hmm.
but once that's done, are you not supposed to do it anymore?
No?
Sorry, I'm just asking. I'm just
a question because I was thinking of that.
because we were not. I'm just asking.
Any other groups
Is it the
that
NFP?
talked about, getting your tubes tied or that kind of thing.
Right.
And that wasn't something that was to be changed.
Right, because it's blocking out the possibility of there being life.
Right.
So then the sexual act becomes a selfish act because you've deliberately cut it off from the possibility of life. Of course, if there's major medical reasons that has to happen, that's a different story. But and so it's that, again, God's plan, and what happens, even if we don't want it to happen or think that it won't happen, it happens because God created us and He knows us better than we know ourselves. So when you deliberately block off part of the purposes of the sexual act, to procreation of children, then it becomes an intrinsically selfish act and just breeds selfishness. So that's where contraception, that's why that's wrong. But you were asking about...
Your past childbearing years.
Yeah. Okay. So not only is the purpose of sex, and marriage for children, but also the unitive aspect. So you got to have both, and that's why in vitro fertilization is wrong, because you have the procreation, but you've taken it away from the unitive. So it's either way becomes something wrong, and it might seem like it's coming up with something good, bringing out a good thing, but it's actually ends up causing hurt, and because it deviates from God's plan. But yeah, so a couple, and a couple that's of course past childbearing years, they still would continue to have that marital act because it strengthens them in their marriage, continues to bond them close together. And that's why we have NFP then, and that's a wonderful gift that the church has that encourages a way, rather than using contraception, which becomes a selfish act. We have NFP, natural family planning, and it requires abstinence, it requires self-sacrifice, it requires a lot. But if the couple works together to do it, they grow just in unimaginable ways. They grow closer together. They learn to have intimacy outside of the sexual act. They can learn to actually be, really good friends. And so there's all kinds of things that can come from that, and that's in keeping with God's plan. And so that's when it would be used if it's not a good time to have children, or for whatever reason. Apart from just selfish reasons, as long as there's a good reason that, we really shouldn't have children at this time, then that you would use that natural family planning and learn the cycles and be able to, then when you do have sex, then it's a beautiful thing, and you renew your love for each other. Your marriage commitment, your covenant of marriage is renewed every time you have sex. So it's a beautiful thing. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it's both of those goods of marriage. Yeah. Yeah, that's why it's tough in our society today, because there's such a perversion of sex. Sex is sacred, and what it's become in movies and music so often, and just in our popular culture, it's just become a casual thing, just become a recreation. The sacredness is totally missing. It's so you see how something that is holy has become profane, has become mundane, has become ordinary, and God says, no, this is holy, this is a beautiful thing, and you need to treat it with reverence and respect. So if people can see that, again, that's a positive outlook on it. If you can see that, this is what God has for us. The world's saying, have this. This is going to feel good, and this is going to seem to satisfy, everything you want. But you're going to be, then you find out, well, we're actually empty. This is a counterfeit. The world has a counterfeit. It looks good, but it's really empty. And God is the real thing. So, yeah. So that's why the whole theology of the body is just excellent.
There's like 152 lectures, and if you read them, they're very short, actually.
Yeah.
You can go through them. They build on one another. It's really
and there's even books that will
I found the
comment
harder to understand.
Commentaries.
The original one's very nice. Just little bites.
Yeah, or recordings. Christopher West is one that's done a lot of recordings on theology of the body, and there's all kinds of material you can find out there on that. It is God's plan for marriage and sexuality. That's what it is. Very beautiful. And then when you see that lived out, so beautifully in marriage, it's just a beautiful thing to see. The love, the self-sacrifice, and for better or for worse, so there's difficulties, and kind of like the movie, The Vow, the book, The Vow. It was based on a true story. And then the movie was with Rachel McAdams, and the guy that was in Magic Mike. What's his name? At any rate, anyway.
A head injury, I think it's that.
What's that?
The girl gets a head injury and doesn't.
Yeah. So she has head injury, has no memory of the past 2 years of her life when she met him and got married.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, and so they have a decision to make. Now there's no feelings on her part. She has no feelings for him. She has no memory. And so she has to make a decision to be willing to fall in love with him again. She knows, well, I fell in love with him once. And so that's what they're encouraged with their counselor to do, is to start dating each other again, so that she can now have memories of their courtship and then their wedding, and then they do eventually get married again. And so it's really beautiful. But that's a good example of love, the sacrifice of love, and for better, for worse. This is definitely worse. No one would have blamed him if she had left, or if he had left, because it was a difficult situation. But how beautiful it is that they stuck it out, and that they learned to love each other in a whole new way again, right from the beginning. But she had videos, their first marriage, and watched that, but didn't mean anything to her. It was like, that was her, but she had no memory of it, So then to be able to create her own, and just do it all again, it's tremendous. Yeah. Yeah. Drag your husband's hair. Yeah.
Somebody did a football game the next day.
Oh, yeah. Neither one of us really are into football.
Yeah, you never know. You might see him kind of secretly wiping away a tear, yeah? Wouldn't want to let you see that. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. Good to have a sensitive man.
After 40 years.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yep. Any other thoughts or comments or anything?
Well, I think marriage is also about communication. If you think about our first RCIA, we talked about prayer, how important prayer is important to establish our relationship with Christ, and we continually pray. Well, that same communication is needed with your partner. It's easy to brush your partner off, like they're talking, it's like, oh, I don't have time to listen to this.
Yeah.
But, and God never says, I don't have time for you. And sometimes it takes a lot of extra effort on our part to give our spouse
that full attention that they deserve. And it's a give and take. I mean, it can come from either one of us. But I think building that communication makes us more sensitive to each other's needs and what's important to us. Because we do have different things that are important.
We found out that, or I found out in the last 4 years, through the academic stuff. I mean, I would always pray for our family. There's, prayers for husbands and wives, and I would always, but it seemed like we were never together long enough to pray together. And we are religiously, no pun intended, religiously doing prayer together, and then the rosary, and it's like, I've seen such and both of us. I mean, like I said, we've been married 40 years. We finish each other's sentences, same thoughts, I can know what he wants before he even says it, but it's made a big change. Our communication skills, you would never think that, you could improve on those.
Yeah.
You think you know it. Even though you don't know it all, you still think you know it.
Yeah.
And it does. It really brings you closer. The change in both of us has been absolutely wonderful. As our prayer life has increased together, it's, so I think heaven yet.
Yeah, that's a good
I
point.
pray for him.
Yeah, that's you're there. You get married to help each other, on your journey home to heaven. Your what was the term that was used in the other group about partners in salvation? It's very beautiful. And that's what it is. And so so prayer this can be the center. Yeah, and it only helps.
Your marriage is together, prayer and everything.
Yeah.
Everything together. Right.
Yeah.
You, husband, God,
Yeah.
It's together, and that's what it's supposed to be. Takes a long time to get through this big storm.
Yeah, and then it's that prayer, that reliance upon God when things get difficult, and tough situations, and that gets you through it, Yeah. It's a good strength.
They have the perfect marriage, so that they don't have problems.
Right, yeah.
So when Mike and I, we went, instead of on the pre-Cana thing, we went to an engaged encounter weekend.
Okay.
And one of the last things they did was they made us, hold hands this way, like make a triangle. And they're always like, never let that triangle go. You hold on to each other, and then you each hold on to God. And as long as you have that triangle, nothing can come inside of that sacred space and tear you apart.
Beautiful, yeah.
And we've had times early hard, and you would be like, triangle.
That's good. You can just say that, and you both know.
I don't want to do that right now, but and you make it. But sometimes it's like, it is true. Yeah, it is true. It is true. Because then you focus on what's really important. It's like, oh no, it's not trying to decide where you're going, for this holiday, and not trying to do this or that, or we forgot to write what in the checkbook. It's like, it's like it brings it all back down to perspective of what matters.
I can remember the day that we got married. Probably most of the day I was scared to death, but I can remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is for real. I'm going to wake up next to this man for the rest of my life. I mean, I can still remember thinking that. I had a girlfriend that was married a week after me. Her thought was, it doesn't work, I'll get a divorce. Oh. But she has been divorced 3 times now, and still hasn't found
Yeah.
her love, I guess.
She's found Mr. Ron, though,
But I'm
a couple
thinking,
times.
wow. I guess that's why I've been married 40 years, because, well, God apparently put that in my head, because who else would have?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can still remember that. That's still, yeah, every time I get upset with Lee, I think back, this is the man you're going to wake up for the rest of your life, and you're not done with life. You have to reconcile this now.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think that most couples would go into marriage, thinking this is going to be lifelong, But if they don't, then they don't have a chance because,
She's just kept going on and on and on. And she is a Christian. I mean, she's not an atheist or anything else, a Christian, but I'm like,
And sometimes people listen, like, people get so caught up in the person and being in love, and that you don't listen to people around you. And when I went through my annulment, I was married before and I married Mike. When I went through my annulment and had to really look at it, I didn't remember it until I started writing things down, but I can remember my wedding day to my first husband, and my dad just hated him with a passion. And we were walking up the steps in the basement, and my dad looks at me and he's like, Miss Marie, we don't have to do this. We can walk right out of here and go to work. We do not have to do this. And I was like, I thought he was joking, and I looked at him and he was like, no, really, we don't have to do this. And, looking back, a lot of the things my dad told me about him were true, but I couldn't see that.
Yeah. Dad's instincts for a daughter's
But you know what?
really strong.
You know what? Mike is the only guy that I ever took home my dad liked. I took home a doctor and a lawyer, and my dad hated both of those. So when I brought home Mike, day one, he's like, Miss Marie, I actually like this one. And I was like, thank you, Jesus.
Finally.
Thank you, God. Prayers and thanks. But, I think people don't listen. I mean, they don't really listen to people around them who can see from the outside looking in. But,
Wow, that turned out to be true.
It did.
That's a good
But
choice.
after I went through that annulment process, when they ask you that one question, like, what did your family think or something like that, I was like, I remember Dad saying that now.
Yeah.
oh, now it makes sense.
Yeah.
I told my mom that after the fact. I'm like, did you know Dad said that? And she was like, oh, yes, your Dad said that.
Yeah. Wow.
And how old were you?
Yeah.
20.
Yeah, about.
And, we dated through high school, so I guess I don't think I really knew then what love was, like what I know now.
What you know now. And
It was nothing like it is now,
Yeah, I can remember getting mad that first year of marriage and sitting on the back steps a lot. Because I didn't want to yell. So I'd sit on the back steps and brew. And then I'd go back in after I called him. And it was all right. Poor
Yeah.
really mean that. That was poorly. Wonder if he eats Good thing you had it at the house.
Yeah, stuffed animals.
Because you could always go. What's Maggie? And I'd go to the dog, or yell on the dog, or something. Then he'd come in and feel sorry for me. We'd talk about it. Oh, that was forget it.
And I think a lot of times some of the things that we make so big in our lives and we make such big deals, they are. We were like 28, 29 when we got married.
You can finish up and we'll move in about
We were
5 minutes.
older, but we were also used to be very independent. They lived up here, I lived in Gallup Place, and we got married. And all of a sudden, we both made plans for Friday night. I made plans for my friend. He said, sure, we'll be there. And he made plans for his, and I got home. He says, no. I said we could do this, and I said, but I said we could do this. You go with your friends, I'll go with my friends. But from this point on, because it's got the calendar that's been, well, it was in the bathroom for years before we had kids. But we had the master calendar, and if you didn't write something on the calendar, it didn't happen. So that's kind of the way, again, it was written communication. And as we had kids, the calendar will move to the kitchen. And, but again, as little as that seems, we were furious with each other, because we were accustomed to doing our own thing, not, like you said, the triangle, not our piece together.
All right, turn your brain on. I want to try to go through this stuff really fast. I'm going to start off by, there's a note that says, please note, underline on. All of this stuff is very touchy. We really need to approach things very compassionately with people. First thing I want to hammer is the stuff in the box there at the top. The purpose of the church's guidelines. This is important to start with these fundamental things before we start looking at specific issues. So the first thing, whether we like it or not, some choices go against God's will because they violate His design for human life. This is a fundamental starting point with some things. It's the reality. Some things the church says are morally wrong. Sometimes we feel uncomfortable with that because it's the way life is, The second part of that, though, the church's moral guidelines are there to keep us on the right path and allow us to enjoy the fullness of life. They're not there to make us miserable, in other words. The church gives us these rules and guidelines to help us to experience joy, and really to experience the joy that God wants to give us, the fullness of life that He wants us to have. It's really important to have that perspective. And I want to hammer those general principles. Just run real quick. Number one, human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. Therefore, every person deserves to be respected. Their life needs to be respected. Their dignity needs to be respected. Regardless of anything, every single person made in God's image and likeness needs to be respected. Number two, it's always morally wrong to intentionally take the life of an innocent person. The wording is really careful there. But across the board, you can never take the life of an innocent person. You can never morally justify that. The key there is you can't think of an innocent person. If someone's trying to attack you and harm you, you have the right to defend yourself, even if you cause harm or even if you kill that person, because at that moment you're not an innocent person in that sense.
So if someone breaks into your house, you shoot them, that's it.
Yeah, that's self-defense. You have a right to defend your life because you're made God's image and likeness. This whole stuff doesn't mean like everybody can beat you up or harm you. You can't do anything. That's not what the church says.
You have to feel that your life is threatened. I mean, you can't just shoot them because they break in.
Yeah.
Just war.
And I didn't cover that, but yeah, there's actually something called just war teaching doctrine. You can look that up in the Catechism, where the church is kind of actually comes from St. Augustine. But what the church basically said, there are certain conditions where it's justified, morally speaking, to go to war in these certain areas. And there's like some criteria for that. And you can look it up. Actually, I would have to look it up for you.
I have some questions on the whole war.
Okay.
You volunteer to join armed services. You're not forced into it. You're just a draft. So technically you'll be choosing to go.
See, the purpose of the military, though, if you approach things, the purpose is you're defending yourself. The purpose is self-defense. That's what it's supposed to be. So that it's not morally wrong for someone to join the military, become a soldier, in order to protect their home. I mean, that's what, I mean, just from a moral perspective.
I can go on this forever. You can read me up.
But I mean, that's what the church would say, like morals speaking. So this is the key, though, is this whole thing about taking the life of an innocent person. I mean, that's the key thing. That you can't do that. It doesn't mean that you can never take the life of a person. If someone's an aggressor, someone's trying to harm you. And those things are very different. That's a good question. I like questions. Number 3, you can never do evil in order to bring about good. You can't do something that's evil, that's wrong, morally wrong, in order to do something good, even if you have good intentions. We talked about that. Father Campbell talked about that last week. Number 4, some actions are classified by the church as intrinsically evil, but they can never be justified under any circumstances. So one of them is taking the life of an innocent person. That's always evil. Okay. So what I want to do is there's several issues related to the beginning of life, which is the first part here, and then there's issues related to the end of life, so I'm going to try to get through all of them if I can. Okay? All right, good. The first thing is abortion. Abortion is an intentional killing of an unborn child. That's what it is. You're taking the life of an unborn child. Just some notes here. Science shows us that human life begins at conception. That's not a debated point. That science is there. The thing to debate involved is whether every human being is also a human person under the law. That's a debated point. The church would say that every human being is a human person. From the moment of your conception, that you are a human being, that you have rights and that you have dignity and you have to be respected. That's what the church would say. That's why they say that right from the moment of conception, you can't harm the life, that new life, that human life. And that obviously the child is an innocent human being. So that's what the next bullet there, abortion is wrong because of that. Just a snapshot, I don't know how much you know about abortion in the United States, but it's legal throughout all 9 months. Most people don't realize that. You look at some of these numbers here. Look at the fourth bullet down. Since 1973, more than 55 million legal abortions have been performed. If you do the numbers here, I tried to do this earlier today, it's more than the population of all of those states put together. Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Michigan, and Indiana. If you add up all of course I rounded off, whatever. But
I like the ones more casualties in the First, Second World War, including more the Holocaust and the Russian whatever.
I think the point on here that jumps out at me the most is 22% of all pregnancies in America.
Yes. Yeah, basically a quarter. That's so it's a disregard. It's that's what
amazing.
That there would be that many people who could regard pregnancy that way.
You know what's interesting? Back when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were in the primaries, and it's going back some time now, one of the things the Democrats used to say, because the Democrats are for abortion, they would say they're pro-choice, but they're really for abortion. But anyway, one of the things they used to say is that they want abortion to be safe, legal, and rare. And interestingly enough, they dropped the term rare. They don't say that anymore. You know, it's good because they're being honest, but it's not rare. I mean, it's good enough. It's 1.2 million abortions per year. 1.2 million. So, those other things here, look at the statistics down there next to the mother and child picture, all the different reasons people give for having abortions. If you look at the last two, it's going to jump out at you. 4% health problems, 1% rapes. So if we outlaw, I'm sure that President Obama would love to outlaw all abortions except for that it's necessary to save the life of the mother or if they're raped. Maybe 95% of all abortions would be outlawed.
Yeah,
of course, he wouldn't want to do that.
And morally, if that law were proposed, on the one hand, yeah, let's do it because that cuts out 95%. On the other hand, it still allows.
I know that's terrible people shout out. Yeah, that's a question about art too.
Believe me, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. Okay. What about the rate? That's a nice page. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
You're on the ball. I'm impressed. That's this letter B at the top of the page there. The tough issues. People talk about these three things. A lot of times you'll hear politicians say, I'm opposed to abortion except for rape, incest, and the life or the health. And the first thing is talk about rape and incest. The church would say, first, you need to be compassionate towards people that have experienced that horrible tragedy of rape. Rape is a horrible crime. It's a horrible crime. You can never justify rape. Actually, rape is an intrinsically evil act. You can't justify that either. The church would say it's always morally wrong. It's never morally right to force yourself into something. But then I'm saying, on the other hand, that you have to be compassionate, but you also have to say every child conceived of rape is still a human being, it's still a person, it's still a child. So it's not morally okay to take the life of that child. And that's what the church would be absolutely opposed. The church says it's absolutely wrong to allow abortion in cases of rape because it's still a human being, still taking the life of that baby. It's sad, it's horrible, it's tragic, but it says here, I wrote this, abortion doesn't solve problems. And so I wish I had this statistics on this, but I saw a statistic recently, in the last couple of weeks, that had, it was kind of comparing women that were raped, that conceived, and had abortions, and these other women that were raped and conceived and delivered the baby, either given them through adoption or whatever. And I don't remember the numbers at all, but somehow the women that were raped, conceived, and had abortions, the percentage of them that committed suicide or attempted to commit suicide was outrageously higher than the other women. It was kind of saying like, abortion doesn't help. Having an abortion doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't take away the pain. It causes more problems.
The woman's a victim of a crime, like any crime victim in society. I think we don't give them enough space. We tend to.
So that's right. So like on the one hand, the church would say it's wrong to have an abortion. That doesn't mean we just say tough love. You're raped. Right. We don't care about it. We can't do that. I mean, you have to reach out with compassion and help them.
And the church does that, right? Through their adoption services and all that.
I would understand adoption. Let's say they didn't put their baby up for adoption, and they had the baby. They would have to look at their baby every day.
Yeah, but you know what's funny is that there actually are women who have done that, and they're happy.
I have. It's not because I have a grandson who's adopted, and I was worried about, this is not my flesh and blood. That never even enters your mind. You first see that child, that's all.
I mean, I can understand what you're saying in one sense, but like if you look at people that have done that, there are real life examples of people that have done that, and they look and they say, this is my baby. It's not some other guy's baby. That's the way they look at it. I mean, if you think, scientifically or biologically, it still would be your baby anyway, because it would be your genes and baby. It would also be the other guy's baby, but biologically.
But statistically, the women numbers pan out on the rape and incest, the ones that don't have the abortions actually do better.
That's what I saw on the statistics. You can Google that.
It makes sense because you have this, once you have your child, that is still in the back of your mind, but it's like, it changes.
It takes the pain.
Well, yeah, a child does change your life.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, honestly, despite what our society says, abortion doesn't solve the problem. I mean, abortion is another act of violence. Actually, this goes back. This goes back to this first thing here about the guidelines. Anybody, if it's true, just put it this way. I like to put it this way to kind of my wage up on the table before it gets if the church is true, if it's true, what it's saying. We're all true. Yeah. So if it's true that this an act of abortion takes a life, it's morally wrong, it violates God's design, if that's true, and I do that action, even maybe if I don't even realize it, if I do this morally evil thing, somehow I'm going to suffer the consequences of it, even if I don't realize it. It's kind of like this. If you don't realize that, let's say your good buddy Matt Westfall, he has this kind of strange thing where he's always giving you this I don't know, like, he's always bringing you cups of coffee, like you're making coffee and stuff. And you don't realize that really is, he knows that you have some kind of an insurance policy and he's trying to get the money from it. And he actually has been putting a little bit of poison in your coffee every time. I mean, you don't realize that you're drinking this stuff and you're taking this poison in. Eventually, it'll kill you, even though you may not be morally guilty of anything because you're not killing yourself. But it's kind of like that in the sense of the church teaching and stuff. The church says moral evil is like poison for our souls. Even if we don't realize it, we suffer the consequences for it. And even if we do these things somehow, I mean, honestly, sometimes people look at their lives and stuff, and they're like, I don't know what's wrong. I don't understand what happened. And they kind of look back and they say, oh, I did these things wrong. I didn't know they were wrong at the time, but I suffered from it.
It's like an addiction, because I speak frankly about my past life. I've drunk too much. I've chased women, and I still pay for that today because I have to say no, and it's hard for me because I've had a bad habit. And so,
once you develop the habit,
right, and so, you pay for it. You pay for the transgression.
And you just have to constantly fight it. Once you go down that road, you're never free.
So,
That's true. But other things are true too, and even apart from the addiction stuff. I mean, that's the thing about the church's moral values. In fact, that's why the church teaches on contraception are so important, because so many married couples, maybe they don't even realize that it's wrong, but they're doing something that's morally wrong, and they suffer because of it. And sometimes they don't even see it. And like I said, the thing about rape and stuff, it's not a clear-cut, easy thing to say, like I said, you can't just tell a woman, sorry, you're out of luck. But I mean, our challenge, let's put it like this. What would Jesus do? He would not have an abortion for that woman. He wouldn't provide it. He wouldn't promote it. He wouldn't drive them to the abortion clinic. He wouldn't encourage it anyway.
Pay taxes.
He wouldn't pay taxes for it.
Point out that we all do.
He would walk with that woman. He would be there to be supportive, to be compassionate, to bring them along, to give them whatever they needed. And he wouldn't help in killing the life of the baby. So the compassion really is key. And it's not always what people want to hear, but it's still the truth. So the other part of this is the life of the mother. And the first thing I have to point out is there's two different phrases that sound the same, but they're not. The health of the mother and the life of the mother. Politicians throw these phrases out all the time. Basically, what it means is, I'm just quote here from the Supreme Court, and on the same day that the Supreme Court ruled on Roe versus Wade, which legalized abortion, the very same day, they had this planned out in advance, but that very same day they also ruled on this other court case called Doe versus Bull. Roe versus Wade legalized abortion. Doe versus Bull basically said that we need to have abortion throughout all the periods of pregnancy. And that's where you get this thing about the health exception. And you can see in the book here that they talk about the health of the mother, including these factors: physical, emotional, psychological, familial, the woman's age, anything related to her well-being. So, in other words, if you go to a clinic and say, I want an abortion because it's going to stress me out to have a baby, okay. That's really what it is. It means anything. Yeah. Now you're in trouble. So when politicians say, well, I think we should, I don't want to have abortion except for the health of the mother, that's a scam. That basically says that, we need to have abortions for any reason whatsoever, anything related to her health. So if she, wants to get another degree, she can have an abortion. If she wants to earn more money and having a baby's going to take away her money, she can get an abortion. I mean, it really is anything. It has nothing to do with her life. The other phrase, life of the mother, means if you don't get an abortion, there's something that's physically harming your life, and you're going to die if you don't do something. That's different than health. And it's just so you know the difference between those two different things. And all these notes you need to read later because it's going to make more sense if you read it. There's two actually concrete situations like that. One is an atopic tubal pregnancy. Another one's called cancer of the uterus. Where actually the woman's pregnant, she's got cancer of the uterus, and you're kind of stuck in situations where, especially with tubal pregnancy, if you don't do something, the baby's going to die or the mother's going to die. That's all you have. And the church says that you actually can do, it is moral to do a medical procedure to save the life of the baby. You need to know this story. To save the life of the baby, to save the life of the mother. That may result in the death of the baby. And this is something called the principle of double effect. Basically what it says is the principle of double effect says that in our world, in our fallen world, sometimes we have a choice we make, an action we choose that has a direct intended consequence, and then another indirect consequence that happens that we can't control. So there's something we're trying to do, this is my intention, this is what I'm doing, this is the result of my action. There's something else that's going to come from that, but I can't prevent it. I can't keep that. That's one of the two effects, the principle of double effect. And the church says that you can do these medical procedures, like in a tubal pregnancy, they have to remove the section of the tube or wherever where the baby plants. They remove that from the woman's body. The baby's going to die because it can't be outside the mother's body, especially early on like that. So the church says that is permitted to do that. It's not considered an abortion, but it falls under these. There's 4 different criteria you have to do that. Number 1, there are no other reasonable alternatives. You can't give her medication or something. Number 2, you do everything possible to save the life of the baby. Number 3, you treat the baby as a human being with dignity and respect. You can't just go in and chop the baby up as an abortion. Number 4, you're not trying to take the life of the baby. The death of the baby is only the side effect of your direct action, which is that medical procedure. So the church does say you can do these certain things to save the life of the mother. And obviously these things don't happen very often. Interestingly enough, the guy who wrote the principles of all that, the St. Thomas Aquinas, he was 1200s. So This is our Catholic faith. I mean, we live this stuff now. It's something from the 1200s that we can use in our medical science. It's really incredible. So he figured all this out. He's a genius. So anyway, there's some stuff here about healing after abortion. We always have to be compassionate towards women who have abortion. We don't condemn them. We reach out to them with love and compassion. There's stuff there. There's resources available. My email newsletters right there. You can look at that. You can look it online. I mean, it's just an advertisement for it. This is a commercial. Paid advertisement. So anyway, I know I did that kind of fast. Any questions about that? All right. We're going to flip over to stem cell research. It's actually my pages are out of order. So we have to go over 3 pages where it says 2 stem cell research in the top. I want to do this in 5. So I'm going to give you the short version. Okay? Stem cell research. Anyone know what that is?
I did some consulting work for high-tech companies that did that. So.
What the heck? You shouldn't go over it.
You know it.
You know the difference between adult stem cell research and embryonic stem cell research? All right, I better go.
I do.
Well, here, I'll just... That's important.
This is important.
Well, the basic concept, stem cells are like cells that don't have a job. You can manipulate them and give them a specific job, like it's a heart cell or whatever you need. Inject them into a person's body and they kind of regenerate the organs from inside. That's the concept. It sounds like science fiction, but it's true stuff. Embryonic stem cell research, that's where they take a human embryo like 5 to 7 days old. I don't remember the numbers, to be honest. But a very young baby. This is before it looks like a baby. It's just like a clump of cells in the very, very early stages. And they extract those stem cells from the baby, which kills the baby. And it always entails the death of that human person. And then they take those and they do the research on it.
You want to finish up and come back to your seats, please?
The adult stem cell research, what the scientists have found is that we have adult stem cells throughout the body, and all of us have them. And scientists are able to take stem cells from one part of your body, manipulate them into what you need to put them into a damaged area in your body. But it's your own body, right?
That's what the body uses for normal repair, stem cells.
And you can see on the little scoreboard there that the adult stem cells are actually producing results. They're morally acceptable. The church says this is great. We should promote this and everything. Embryonic stem cells always entail the death of a baby. Always destroy. You can't get them without killing them.
Well, and they
the
don't.
church says it's wrong, and it's actually not producing any results.
No, there's no therapies, no therapeutic modalities, and it's worse than that. The generally generates tumors, cancers, because you put in those cells.
It's interesting.
You can't give them just define their job well enough, so they do what they want to. And now the patient dies of cancer.
When we talk about in vitro fertilization and sterilization, I want to present this in a way you've heard before. In vitro fertilization basically is where you take the sperm of a man, the egg of a woman, and you fertilize them in a petri dish. In vitro means literally in glass. It's like doing a laboratory. So you're basically creating babies in a lab, and you plant those embryos in a woman. The church says that's wrong because, for one, you're treating those babies like commodities, and you're destroying them with the ones that are extra. And there's all kinds of stuff you're up to. They always create more than they need. They always destroy the ones that have genetic defects. I mean, all kinds of problems. Something that's really interesting. Pope Paul VI was the first. They didn't have in vitro fertilization then. But Pope Paul VI in 1978 was this encyclical called Humane Vitae. He talked about how contraception was the morality of contraception. And one of the things he said was that if we continue with contraception, we're going to start treating our bodies like machines, and looking at them as people, as commodities. And it's interesting, all these predictions are all being true. But one thing that's fascinating is in vitro fertilization, sterilization, and contraception are kind of the two sides of the same coin. And the real simple way to look at it, and this is not scientific, but it helps you remember it. In vitro fertilization, you want a baby, but you don't want sex. In sterilization, you want sex, but you don't want a baby. And it's like we're separating these things. The church says that our gift of sexuality, the gift of sex that God gives us by His design, has two purposes that are intertwined, and you can't separate them. There's the unitive purpose, which unites the couple together, and the creative purpose, which is open life. The church says you always have to respect both of them. You have to have an openness to life, and you also have to pursue that unity of bringing the married couple together, that's what has to be done in marriage and not outside of marriage. But it's interesting with these two different things, like I said, you're kind of pursuing one and you're pushing the other side. It's just fascinating. Those two really are two different sides of the same coin. you know, where you're really just pulling apart that gift of sexuality for your own purposes. You know? And there's all kinds of stuff out there like euthanasia, organ donation, life-saving.